Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. We have some very exciting news for our listeners.
We do. Tom and I have been talking about the future of, I guess, this program and the future of what we're doing. And so we are going to be doing some stuff on Patreon beginning with the Wisconsin week. We will do, we're not taking anything away per se, but we're going to be doing stuff over there, ad-free stuff. The Facebook lives that we normally do will be moved exclusively to there. We'll have more information about all of that moving forward. And if there's anything you guys want us to do, would like to see, we are talking about maybe also doing just a college football podcast in addition to this. If there's anything you guys would be interested in seeing or hearing, please let us know. You can hit us up on Twitter or email. My email is tonygerdeman@gmail.com. Tom, your email is?
tomorr@gmail.com.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So easy enough. We would appreciate any kind of feedback you guys have because obviously, without listeners, there's no point in doing this.
Yeah, and just in case you're not familiar with Patreon, it's basically a platform where you can pay a small monthly amount and get bonus content. It's, I think theoretically they pitch themselves as being for artists and stuff, and this is a form of art, I guess, in the loosest possible sense. But for example, it's. There's other podcasts I support. There's a Mets podcast I support, and it's, $5 a month, and you get it. They'll do bonus podcasts that are not released in the normal feed. The one thing that I think we should make real clear is nothing's changing.
Yeah.
If you choose not to support it, that's perfectly okay. We are perfectly happy to continue having the relationship that we have with you. We love and respect all of you. You'll just keep getting the podcast as you normally do. Nothing will change. If you want to do a little more, we are more than happy. We are looking at doing additional podcasts, a nationally focused college football podcast, maybe. Perhaps letting listeners suggest the topic of shows, like do separate shows. We'll just do a 30-minute show however often. That is just basically a listener question that we do a real deep dive on. If you want to ask those questions, that's a Patreon support kind of thing. If you want to listen to those kind of bonus shows, something like that will probably be a Patreon only kind of thing. But your normal Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday instant reaction shows, those will all still be available on your normal feed the way you've always gotten them.
And we do have other stuff that we can't even really get into yet that will maybe perhaps be part of that as well. So there's more stuff coming. And we would greatly appreciate you. Just like I said, feedback is always welcome and appreciated, even if you're not feedbacking about the Patreon stuff, because we enjoy the listener question shows. Granted, we're not going to get to any of those listener questions from last week, probably today, and we apologize for that. But today, Tom, was Ryan Day. Everything has moved up a day because Ohio State, if you didn't know, they play Friday night. So, everything has moved up a day. Our regular Tuesday was today, Monday, with Ryan Day, Jeff Hafley, Jonathon Cooper, Josh Myers, other J names such as
Jordan
Fuller. And Jake Hausman did not quite make it to the session, but he was scheduled. So it was a J Day and a Ryan Day day. And a Monday.
And any day we have a Jeff Hafley day is always a good day.
It's a good day.
Yep. Jeff Hafley is very consistently the most entertaining interview we got. But I think the best answer today, well, you had a good one from Josh Myers, but we'll start. I think Jordan Fuller, who said, as a safety, sometimes he gets bored at the back of the Ohio State defense because everyone's just making tackles in front of him.
Yeah.
Certainly something we would have heard from an Ohio State safety in the 2018 season at any point.
No, I'm trying to imagine who would be bored on last year's defense. Maybe the defensive ends after they commit themselves to a pass rush and just see the touchdown going by them. I don't know. The thought that a defensive player, specifically the deep safety in this Ohio State defense, can find himself bored at times, given what we saw last year, is a thought that I never would have imagined having or somebody else having. but it's a testament to this entire defense and the scheme that Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison and Larry Johnson and everybody has come up with. But bored?
It's like being the goalie on one of those like old neutral zone trap New Jersey Devils teams where it's like, well, I get to stand here and my job is to not let anything go past me, and the other team is shooting 13 shots a game. So
it's like NHL Live when you would play it and you wouldn't need a goalie because you would just destroy everybody and beat the heck out of them and take the puck from them, and you could win, like 25-6 or whatever. This is kind of like that, in that, I guess Jordan Fuller sometimes is unnecessary. Maybe blitzing more. But then, you know what? Jeff Hafley also said, they're an interesting thing. When they are devising stuff to put into this defense, if there's a chance that they could give up a big play, they won't put it in. And it would be something like that. Let's have Jordan Fuller do this, as opposed to, no, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's just have him stay back. And if he's bored, so be it.
Yeah, he said, on offense, the number one goal is, quote, we want to eliminate explosives, which, considering how often things detonated on the Ohio State defense last year, that's probably a pretty good thing. It's like the way people roll their eyes when you hear something's a bend, but don't break defense. I mean, this Ohio State defense hasn't been bending very much either, so maybe that is part of the reason why it didn't seem quite so eye-rolling, but...
That's exactly what he described, though.
Right, yeah, it was basically they don't want to let people get big chunk plays, and they're tied for number one in the country with, I think, 4 plays of 30 yards or more allowed this season. If their goal is basically, let's see you drive for a touchdown. Go ahead and put together an 8-play touchdown drive, and then we will tip our cap and we will adjust to that. But teams have not been able to do that. And as they have been eliminating those chunk plays, that keeps the score down. And with the Ohio State offense scoring as much as it's scoring, I mean, if the Ohio State offense has to score 21 points to win every game, that seems well within their abilities.
Yeah, I think they've given up maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns this season, Ohio State has.
And a couple of them were garbage time against Florida Atlantic.
I'm just wondering, what is the longest drive against the defense with the most starters out there? And I'm sure
it's got to be that Indiana trick play, probably. I mean, that's a junk play. Yeah, I mean that was that double pass against Indiana. They basically have not given up first half points against anyone else. I mean, they gave up 1 touchdown to Michigan State, and I don't remember that being a super long drive. They shut out Nebraska. Yeah. I mean, they have just shut down everyone.
It makes you wonder how much better they would be if they just would stop playing Tough Borland so much.
Subscribe to our Patreon, and Tony will have a conversation about the linebacker situation.
Yeah. So Ryan Day started off the session talking about people want to know, what do you do during the bye week? And he said the same thing that he said last week, is he do some self-scouting. And I thought it was interesting that people tried to get answers on, well, what'd you find? And both him and Hafley are like, well,
we're not going to tell you, idiots.
Exactly. Yeah. That was actually their exact comment. Word for word, both of them.
That wasn't the comment, but that was the subtext.
I think the one quote I do have here from Day, just a lot of little things here and there on both sides of the ball. Thank you for that insight.
It's both responsive and entirely non-responsive all at once.
So that's the things that they were doing. And then another interesting aspect, they talked to the players and showed every player 3 things they do well and 3 things they could do better. And when we talked to you guys last week, we told you there are going to be some uncomfortable conversations, and players are going to be told where they stand and what they need to do better. It is interesting that there is positive reinforcement in there as well, and positive feedback saying, and which I think everybody would appreciate. Maybe not the old timers who are, this is coddling, but it's good to see, here's what you're doing well. Mm-hmm. We love this. Keep doing this. Now, if you could get these 3 things over here to be like this, now we've got something.
Well, that's just good management. I mean, you hear there's lots of eye rolling when people talk about millennials, but kids today, as I sound 1,000 years old, kids today don't want to be told you're terrible and here's why. They want to be told, here's where you're doing well. Here's where you could do, where there's room for improvement and sort of next steps. He called it 3 up, 3 forward. So here's three things up, 3 places where you're looking up and you're doing well, and 3 things to work on moving forward. And that's a very smart way to do it, because you're not going to, that's a way to have a conversation about here's how you need to get better without ticking anyone off. Like you're starting it with positives.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and we would like to see you continue to grow, and here are some areas in which you could continue to grow, not you suck, here's why.
Well, that's the thing. I guess the old school way would be like, here are 3 things I'm surprised you're able to do well, and here are 3 areas where you suck. And I'm sure people back then loved that kind of feedback, and that's why they're so fond of it today.
I'm going to briefly divert us to a side conversation we had at the beginning of the interview before Ryan Day came in. Our good buddy Jack Park dug up the stat that the last time Ohio State played a Friday game was in 1959. They played a road game at USC. They lost 17-0. That's the last time Ohio State played a Friday regular season game. And someone asked Jack, so what do you think of it? He goes, oh, he hated it. And it was like, well, yes, Woody hated everything. So, yes.
Imagine.
But imagine that. Okay, back to the present day.
Yeah, no, that's it. I have nothing else. Woody has spoken. Like, I mean, Woody didn't like Saturday games either. So I don't. And then Ryan Day, people were asking him, how do you feel about Friday games? And it was one of those things like, I can't not,
my contract says I have to show up, so therefore I have to show up, and that's the end of my opinion.
He's very like, I'm not going to give you an opinion on certain things. He's just not going to give you his opinion on it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that is probably a wasted energy thing. Like Ryan Day might just absolutely hate it like the devil, but guess what? It's out of Ryan Day's control. That is the Big Ten Network and all of its member schools have decided that they're going to sell everything to TV and for whatever price they can get, and Ryan Day doesn't get a vote, so therefore Ryan Day just shows up where the schedule tells him, and every moment that Ryan Day spends thinking this is really stupid is a kind of a wasted moment. He did say, though, that in talking to high school coaches, he hadn't gotten a ton of negative feedback on that, but I mean, high school coaches in general have not been real big on them playing on Friday nights.
No, and I'm sure as he's been here for a few more years, and becomes more, where high school coaches become more accustomed to complaining to him, this would be something that he would hear about. I do wonder how willing and happy he would be to go to Rutgers on a Friday night.
No one's ever happy to go to Rutgers, so that's I don't think a Saturday is going to be any more appealing than a
although
Friday.
We will have to be there Friday night because
that's true. It will not be a night game though. We have essentially confirmed that the current Big Ten rule is anything after the first weekend in November, both teams would have to agree for it to be a night game. Ohio State is not going to agree to play a night game at Rutgers. Penn State is not going to agree to play a night game at Ohio State. So and with the Wisconsin game being at noon, the Northwestern game will functionally be the last night game of the season for Ohio State.
I don't think Rutgers wants a night game against Ohio State either. I think they just, let's just get this over with.
If it's darker, you can't see all the empty seats.
That's true. That is true. Demario McCall was mentioned. We should mention him as well last week. He just got a ding in pregame warmups, which tells you that you are, I guess, an injury-prone player when you get hurt during warmups, but he should be good to go. And I did see him limping after the game. We maybe mentioned it at the time. And Ryan Day was also asked about Jalen Gill, and same answer as ever. Basically, he's still working to get into that depth chart. But as we've said before, that H-back depth chart has been impacted by the 2 tight end sets because you don't have room for a second H-back when you're playing so much of that 2 tight end under center stuff that has been effective. And you're not going to sit KJ Hill out after you've already taken him off the field. It's not like you're going to put another H-back in when he's already getting rest. So really, there's no room for anybody behind KJ.
Well, and CJ Saunders is back now from the injury that he missed the first couple, month and a half of the season with. So, there's not an increasing amount of playing time at the H coming right now. And, Gill played in the Indiana game, I believe, and I think had 1 touch and fumbled the ball, which that's, if you are looking to prove to the coaches that you belong on the field more, that is not a great way to go about doing it. Right. So,
and maybe he did some more of that in practice this past week and showed that he belongs. And, I was asked about the lack of not getting a second tight end in this recruiting class and how that might impact the Buckeyes down the road. But they will only lose Rashad Berry after this season if everybody stays. And now you still got 3 tight ends that you like, and you're bringing in an incoming guy. So I don't know that the two tight end situation is going to change until you lose both Luke Farrell and Jake Hausman after 2020, in which case they might try to bring in 2 tight ends next year, because it sure seems like this is going to be a mainstay of this offense. But you've got to make sure you've got 2 tight ends that are good enough to help you out. And right now they're rotating 4 like it's nothing.
Yeah, they have too many good tight ends right now, which, I mean, as far as problems go, is not a real terrible problem to have. The other
especially at tight end U.
Yeah, exactly. A place that just lives and dies with passing to the tight ends, like Ohio State. The other guy that is in that room that we haven't talked about yet is Cormonte Hamilton, true freshman.
Yes.
He's been a little bit of an afterthought this year because he's been dinged up with an injury. We don't know. I don't think we've ever heard exactly what the injury was, but he's missed a bunch of time. He has been dressed, I believe, for the last couple games, but I don't believe we've seen him on the field yet. So, yeah, he's another name that, that's not a real big surprise when you have 4 proven veteran tight ends that a true freshman has not who entered injured, that has not cracked the rotation. That's not a huge surprise, but he's another person who will, figure in that depth chart in the future.
He's also a unique tight end, being like 6'2", 260 pounds. He's not your prototypical guy, so it'll be fun to see how they end up using him. Cam Brown was talked about, cornerback, redshirt, actually a sophomore cornerback. Cam Brown was talked about quite a bit after the way he stepped up in for Damon Arnett last week. And did Hafley say he might be the most improved guy of everybody in the secondary there? Ryan Day said he's one of the most improved guys. And basically, sometimes it takes freshmen, it takes that freshman year for you to become not just a college player, but a college student. And I think Day said once your academics and your practice and all of these different things, they tend to fall in line together. And then once that happens, then your football falls in line behind it and you start to produce. And Damon Arnett was not mentioned today, so it doesn't sound like Day said after the game last week that he would be back and he'd be fine. So I don't think anybody's really concerned about it at this point. So that's why he wasn't discussed. But good to have this 4th cornerback, and Hafley said he has full confidence in him. Now you've got to get Sevyn Banks, who I think they had confidence in before, but if they can get him producing like that and just get Tyreek Johnson healthy, because these guys are going to need to play next year, Tom.
Well, they are definitely going to need to play next year when you're going to lose definitely Damon Arnett, very, very likely Jeff Okudah, and possibly Sean Wade. I mean, you could lose your entire defensive backfield next year. And so for sure you're going to need to have some of those guys take a step forward then. But what Hafley said is you're a snap or 2 away. I mean, it is not out of the realm of possibility that 2 guys at the same position get hurt in the same game. Like, that is not at all a crazy thing. And so then you have Cam Brown, who goes from, well, that's good depth, to, okay, Cam Brown, now you're a starter. Yeah. And we've talked all year about how valuable it's been for them to have 3 corners, the caliber of the corners that they have. If you go from that and then there's a big step back, guess what? That hurts. That hurts a lot. And it changes not just that one spot on the field, but it potentially changes how you have to call plays, call defenses, and all that kind of stuff. So having someone like Cam Brown, who's they're now comfortable with, who now is the next man up if someone goes down, huge, huge, huge difference. And then you need, okay, now if 2 guys go down, okay, you need Sevyn Banks to be the next guy up. You need Tyreek Johnson to be the next guy up. And if it doesn't happen this year, like you said, it's going to matter next year.
I like how Hafley said that he's only focused on today and tomorrow. He's not worried. He doesn't care about next year. Next year is so far away. And yes, they do care about next year because they are recruiting, but there is so much season left, possibly 9 games. And so to just already you start thinking about Sean Wade leaving, he hasn't talked to Sean Wade about that. He doesn't want to think about anything like that. It just wants to keep them focused on getting better here at Ohio State, because that's where it is important for them now. And they'll worry about these talks after the season, I think, is basically what Hafley said.
Well, and Hafley said also, someone said, have you had that conversation with Shaun Wade about next year? And he laughed. He's like, no. And he said, like, I have not, I don't lie to you guys. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
And he said, here's the conversation he's going to have with Shaun Wade today. Hey, I looked at the film from practice yesterday. Here's some issues we got to get straightened out. Like, that's where the focus is. It is a very micro focus right now. Because, the NFL, you can't make a decision on the NFL officially until after the season's over anyway. So there's no point in having that conversation now. Hafley's job is to get him prepared, get Shaun Wade prepared, get Jeff Okudah prepared, get Damon Arnett prepared, get the guys behind them prepared. I mean, he said basically, if the guys behind the starters aren't ready to play, then he hasn't done his job. That's what Jeff Hafley's worried about right now. Doing his job, getting those guys ready to play. All the other stuff, the longer term stuff, like that has to wait until after the season.
And there is plenty of time after the season to make that decision because as we saw, Damon Arnett actually changed his mind after the season. So there's plenty of time to deal with all of that and get those ducks in a row. You don't have to worry about it right now, even though now people want to talk to Shaun Wade because they've suddenly discovered he's good and want to ask him about the NFL because, obviously these people listen to our show and have just discovered that we've been talking about him forever. But I'm just digressing right now, Tom.
I did think about today when Hafley was talking about the value of having Shaun Wade and the flexibility he gives him on defense. It was like, we talked about that in like January, didn't we? I mean, this is thanks for listening, Jeff. First of all, we appreciate it.
And somebody asked him, can he play outside? And I think Hafley laughed at that.
It was just like, he can do that. Yes.
And they've even talked about maybe flipping some guys and have gone in thinking maybe they should, but they haven't done that yet in terms of like moving Arnett inside and Wade outside or something of that nature. But they still have that in their arsenal if they want to do that. Great story, Tom. We are going to take a real quick break right now and get a word from our sponsors. Tom, anything else from Ryan Day that you thought we should talk about?
Well, this was sort of a response to a question that we got on our podcast. You asked him about the transfer portal.
Yes.
This is something we talked about last week. You want to go through that?
Yeah, so I asked him, how much do they monitor it during the season? And he said they are definitely watching it. And that's something that's part of Mark Pantoni's duties to staff. They'll watch it. And then I asked him, has it gotten to the point, lastly I asked him if they're holding a roster spot, like a scholarship spot, one of those 85. And he said, no, they're not going to hold anything for the portal. If something happens, then they'll look at it. But I asked him, do you take the next step? And the recruits that you've missed out on over the last couple of years, do you see how many of them aren't playing? And do you maybe anticipate them showing up in the portal? And he said they haven't gotten to that point yet. They'll talk about it in the off season. He doesn't want to get to that point, Tom, but I think that's where everybody's headed.
It sure seems like where the entire college football world is headed at this point. I mean, you kind of saw that with Keandre Jones last offseason, where he came to Ohio State, very talented player, really good kid, made some plays on special teams, but just didn't crack that rotation at linebacker. When he goes in the portal, where does he end up? Yeah. Maryland, his homeschool state where he was recruited, where it's probably easier to get on the field on defense, and he's now been an impact player for them on defense. That is sort of very logically where this seems like it's headed. Now, if a kid isn't good enough to get on the field at, fill in the blank school, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, wherever, Clemson, is that someone who's going to potentially be able to be an impact player at Ohio State? Maybe, maybe not. You don't know, but that's certainly where, on a macro level in the sport, that certainly seems where it's headed.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at the number of transfers having an impact this year, and I'm not even just talking about the quarterbacks. Look at Van Jefferson at Florida, had a good weekend, where you miss out on some guys, and there are guys who are going to be out there because we see it every year, where a 5-star quarterback signs at the same place as the 5-star quarterback the year before, and you're like, well, okay, we'll keep an eye on this one. Just as Justin Fields, people are like, why are you going to Georgia?
Yeah,
and you question it at the time. So maybe it's the ones you question that you keep an eye on because you're like, well, this makes no sense. So let's just put a star by this one and see where things stand, because you have to justify like all of this money that you're bringing in. You have to spend it basically. And so you're like, well, this is, I think this is where things are going to go, where you've got staff members, checking Pro Football Focus, how many snaps, and did this guy play yet? No, he's not. And then do you get shady again? And do you have secondhand guys reaching out to third uncles? And because I think that could be part of the process again. But then, that's where the NCAA has to get back in there with you have to sit out a year. And it's just, there's so much unknown. And it's interesting to watch the coaches deal with it in real time because they're learning too.
Yeah. And I think that we have a sense where this is headed, but a lot of the specifics are still very much like, well, that'll depend on how that all shakes out. And this is the, you have your known unknowns and your unknown unknowns with all of this. Like there may be implications to a lot of the transfer portal stuff that no one has thought of. One of the things that they do know is an issue right now is quarterback depth. Ryan Day talked about that today. He said, ideally you'd like to have 4 guys in that quarterback room. You want to have those young guys where they have a year or two to develop, and you really want them to be people who want to stay at Ohio State and who love Ohio State and love the coaching they're getting and are here for the long term. But he said, the reality is that's not always going to be how it is. And you have certainly seen that shake out that way over the last 18 or so months with Matthew Baldwin transferring, Tate Martell transferring, guys flipping at the last minute. I mean, there's been a lot of turnover and turmoil in that room. And that's somewhat common in college football at this point. Like that's a position where, because it's the one guy can play, you don't have the, you can't be in a running back rotation. You can't be in a wide receiver rotation. And those are generally not guys who are going to play on special teams either. So that's the one position where there really is, 18 months ago, I don't think anyone would have necessarily seen the quarterback thing shaking out the way it has. And you're going to have that at other positions in, perhaps other different ways. But yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty that Ryan Day and every other FBS head coach has to deal with right now.
Yeah, and it was interesting. We know he listens to the show, and we've already explained to him how to solve the issue, and that's by bringing in Ohio quarterbacks who love Ohio State, and you'll at least get 3 years out of them, like you did with Joe Burrow. So it's kind of disappointing that he continues to recruit out of state, and when we've given him this road that will surely work for a period of time. But you want 4 guys, but you can't always get what you want, as a great band once said. But if you try, sometimes you might find that Georgia will have somebody that you need. I think is how that goes.
Something like that.
Hafley talked about several guys, Josh Proctor as being one of those guys who's playing a little bit more the last few weeks than he did before. Jordan Fuller, he didn't say it today, but I think after talking to him after one of the games, maybe Nebraska, said he likes watching Josh Proctor out there because it's fun to see guys who your understudies perform well, let you know that you're kind of doing a good job bringing them along. And I think he's going to continue to play time because there's going to be some blowouts coming.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good bet. One thing Fuller did say today, which goes hand in hand with that, is he wants to leave Ohio State a better place than how he found it. And he said the way you do that is by really working and helping the guys behind you and make sure you're leaving it in good hands. And that's a Josh Proctor thing. That's he
said Marcus Hooker.
Marcus Hooker, yep.
I wanted to then ask him about Marcus Hooker getting a penalty
yes.
for talking after a dead ball. But I did not.
Yeah, they and Jordan Fuller is one of the really, like, you cannot find anyone in that building who will say a bad word about Jordan Fuller. Ryan Day said
maybe Isaiah Pryor.
Right. Well, he's not in the building anymore, so maybe that's why he left. Did you say something bad about Jordan Fuller? A couple weeks ago, Ryan Day said Jordan Fuller was the guy you want your son to grow up to be, and the guy you want your daughter to marry. I mean, he is. There's always like one of those guys where the coach says that about him on the team every year. This year it's Jordan Fuller. Someone else who not hard to get people in that building to talk highly of. Chase Young. I don't know if you noticed this, but when someone was asking him about Chase Young and the impact he has on defense, even apart from the sacks, just in terms of pressuring and how much he helps all the other positions in the defense. Jeff Hafley had the biggest smile on his face when they said, hey, about Chase Young, and he just started smiling like an involuntary reaction. He said great pass rush takes, he was talking about, like, you look at on film and it's like, oh, that route's going to be a problem. There's like a deep route or a combination of routes that some other team runs. And it's like, oh, that could be a problem. And then you go, oh, yeah, that's right. They're not going to have time to do that because Chase Young is going to be eating their quarterback whole in 2.5 seconds. So you don't have time to run those. He said when the defensive line gets after people, those deeper routes don't exist, which, that's the defensive backfield has looked really good this year. That's because they have really good defensive backs, but also because they don't have to cover for 6 seconds.
No,
they have to cover for 2 or 3 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah, I think it was one of the road games when Hafley was asked about Chase Young. He's like, he's a complete game changer. He alters everything an offense does, and he limits anything the defense has to do behind him because he's so good. And Northwestern this week, Ohio State is preparing for 2 quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Hunter Johnson.
How many good quarterbacks are they preparing for, Gerd?
Well, they're preparing for 2 Northwestern quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. That answers your question because their quarterback play at Northwestern has been really bad. Like, if you were to compare them to Michigan's quarterback play, it would be like comparing
Northwestern, the poor man's Michigan.
It's a very poor man's Michigan because, Northwestern, Hunter Johnson, I've only watched him a little bit, the 5-star transfer from Clemson. I'm not trying to be mean to a kid, and I've learned my lesson on, I've deleted so many tweets about Rutgers quarterbacks over the years. I don't want to get into that, but he has had a rough season, and the guy behind him, who I forget his name, who's more of maybe a runner, but Hunter Johnson can run too. So they're preparing for both. Both guys can run. Hafley says that Hunter Johnson has size and has good arm strength, which, okay.
Here's what you need to know about Hunter Johnson. He was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school, went to Clemson, transferred after a year to Northwestern. Today, according to a tweet I saw from a reporter covering Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald was asked, whether he thought Northwestern had a chance to land Justin Fields in the transfer portal. And the quote that was posted was, open quote, "I'm laughing," close quote. Now, you got a 5-star quarterback in Hunter Johnson, so why would it be so laughable that you could get a good 5-star quarterback in Justin Fields?
That's a very good question, because you have shown that you could get somebody. But he's not been anything, and just that entire offense, they are scoring very little. You wonder where exactly will any points come from against the Ohio State defense. And maybe they need more quarterbacks than the ones they have.
They need quarterbacks. They need quarterbacks, that's for sure. And Trent Green's kid, who was the backup at the start of the season, is hurt, and I think out for the year. I think he got hurt in their opener. So it's Hunter Johnson, who is their first-string quarterback, and the third-string quarterback are the ones who are left. Johnson's been dinged up.
Aiden Smith,
that's right. So, yeah, it's not a great situation. They do not have a Cardale Jones waiting to come off the bench in a third string situation. So, and they have so many issues. The offensive line hasn't been very good. They have the same offensive coordinator they've had for 10 years. And if you look at the trajectory of their S&P offensive performances, it's like right before the plane hits the mountain if you're following it on radar. Like, it's like, oh no, that's all going in a bad direction. Don't do that.
So looking at...
Pull up, Northwestern.
Hunter Johnson and Aiden Smith, and we'll get into more Northwestern later in the week. One is completing 48.3%.
Is that good? I don't watch a lot of football.
It's not very good, and that's Hunter Johnson. Aiden Smith is 49.2%. They are 4.1 and 4.3 yards per pass attempt.
Well, I mean, but 49.6, I mean, that rounds
49.2.
49.2.
They don't round up to nothing.
I mean, it rounds up to 50, which rounds up to 100, and 100% is pretty good. So
you can't beat that, actually.
When you think about it.
They have really combined for 2 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. And it's not gonna go well for any part of that offense. Although, Tom, they did score 15 points against the Badgers.
That's pretty good. I mean, that's the thing that is a little bit scary about Northwestern is they're a little bit like Michigan State, where if they get you on the right day, they can kind of drag you down to their level and ugly it up. And it's a Friday night game, so, it's going to be a little weird anyway, so maybe, but probably not. The line on the game it opened at 25.5. It's up to 27.5 for Ohio State, and the over-under is only like 48. So if you combine those two, you're looking at like a 38-10 kind of win, which, it sounds about right.
Yeah.
But
it actually seems kind of unimpressive, but, 34-10 over Michigan State was, it was perfectly fine until you see what Wisconsin did to them.
Yeah.
Anything from the players? Josh Myers is always great, obviously. The center, who...
Hey, Gert, does he do a Greg Stadwara impression?
That is a question that I asked him. If anybody on the offensive line does an impression of Stud, who, if you've ever heard Stud, is a mix of gravel and...
More gravel?
More gravel with a dash of, acid? I don't know. And a very distinct voice. Tom, how does he sound? Can you do it?
You give Josh Myers' answer. I'll see if I can do it. I don't know.
So I asked Josh Myers if anybody on the offensive line does an impression of Stud, and he said, Coach Stud? And then he smiled and said, no. And then smiled and laughed some more and said, never. And it was very apparent that they all do an impression of Greg Stadwara, but he had no intention to do it in front of the assembled media.
Do you remember I think it was Louis Armstrong, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Right. It's kind of like that, but like Louis Armstrong in that song has also been screaming at offensive linemen for 30 years and possibly permanently damaged his vocal cords.
Although then one of the reporters there, one of the members of the media, shared a story about they asked Greg Stadwara how his voice got like that. And he said he just came from church from singing. And that is, perhaps the case. But when you hear him out on the practice field, there is no singing there and nothing that should be said in church.
Very infrequently.
But it was interesting that Myers talked about how much more comfortable he is than he was to start the season, because he told us how ready he was and how ready he thought he was, and he still played well. But I think it's impressive that he's continuing this trend up and can see how far he's come and how much better he feels about the position. And you wonder, this guy's going to be even better down the road, which he should. He's just a redshirt sophomore. But a positive season so far that's only going to get better for Josh Myers.
Urban Meyer just walked by behind the car. So it's
there he goes.
Yeah, there he goes. Urban Meyer out for a walk. Construction, obviously.
Maybe going to do some mowing?
Yeah, maybe. Who's to say? Josh Myers talked about last year as well. You said he felt like he was ready at the beginning of this year. At the beginning of last year, he felt like he was ready then, too. Remember, they moved Michael Jordan over from guard to center to start ahead of Myers, and it was kind of like all year they were kind of like, yeah, he's pretty much ready. We think he's pretty much there. But Myers said, he was a little annoyed that he didn't get to play in 2018 as a starter. But he said, looking back, he probably wasn't ready to play then. He said he had a full year, his redshirt freshman year, to develop. That year was huge. So, and that's a position where it's not just the physical aspects of the game. There's the mental aspects of the game. You got to handle the line calls, all that stuff. There's just a lot going on. That's a very difficult place to play as a young player. But Myers did talk about Harry Miller, who's his backup, who, we talked earlier about people who everyone in the building is going to say glowing things about. Harry Miller's on that list. And Myers he was asked about Harry Miller. He said he's been super consistent, which as a freshman is hard to do. And that's, to be a freshman I don't know that they think Harry Miller's ready to start. Like if Josh Myers is out for the year, I don't know that Harry Miller is the guy who would start. They might have slide Brandon Bowen over to guard, slide Jonah Jackson over to center kind of thing. But, for Harry Miller to be at this point right now, they don't need Harry Miller to start right now. If Harry Miller's at this point right now, which sounds like he's potentially at least 1 year ahead of where Josh Myers was at this point, maybe a year and a half ahead of where Josh Myers was at this point, that's going to be, that gives you an awful big head start on your career, because Josh Myers is not going to be here forever. And when Josh Myers leaves, they have a ready-made answer waiting and ready to go.
And as we've talked about before, it may be before Josh Myers leaves.
Yep.
Depending on how they want to go about it. But every time somebody talks about Josh Myers, especially Harry Miller, especially Josh Myers, when he talks about Harry Miller, he is so glowing and respectful of just. He always says, like, freshmen shouldn't be doing what he's doing. Like, You're not supposed to be doing the stuff that he can do as a freshman. And so that's obviously a good sign. Tom, anything else before we wrap it up here and call it a day?
Jonathon Cooper called Zach Harrison a huge, talented guy, very, very fast, which, story checks out.
Yeah, he's not surprised at how well Harrison is playing.
He also said that Cooper missing 4 games at the beginning of the year, really stunk for him, obviously, missing 4 games at the start of your senior year. But ultimately, down the line, that added experience for those young players is going to help them continue to grow and develop. Because you've seen Javonte Jean-Baptiste, you've seen Zach Harrison, you've seen Tyreek Smith, you've seen Tyler Friday. Those are all guys who are kind of starting or in that rotation for the first full year at least. All of them are already kind of playing, they are sort of further along on that development curve than you probably would have expected. And, just like Josh Myers isn't going to be here forever, Chase Young probably won't be here forever. Might only be 9 games or fewer or more. And, again, you see sort of that next group of players who are going to have to step up and thrive in that role and replace him. They are showing you that they are probably going to be ready to do that this time next year.
It's crazy that they could so seamlessly replace a Bosa, even though they didn't. It wasn't necessarily seamless last year because the defense struggled. But you don't know
what when
you don't
Give
know.
me one example of a time when it looked like there might have been a seam in the Ohio State defense last year.
But I mean, he's been amazing and would deserve that number 1 pick if some team chooses to not take a quarterback and draft him. Should also be a Heisman candidate if the Heisman meant anything, but that's a totally different story. Tom, let's go ahead and call it a day. Thank you all for listening today. And again, give us some feedback on what you might like to hear and see with the Patreon deal and just any of your thoughts on that. We'd appreciate it. And check out the rest of the shows at the Ozone Radio Network with the Buckeye Sleepcast on Mondays and Fridays and the Silver Bullets on Tuesdays. And us, whenever, today it's Monday.
Yeah, well.
Tomorrow it'll be Tuesday. Then Wednesday it'll be Wednesday.
That's how the week typically goes. And just so if you're on Patreon and looking and you can't wait to give us money, we're not there yet.
Yes.
We are when we are asking for your feedback, we are legitimately interested in your feedback. What would you like from us? What can we do for you that would be worth a few bucks of your money?
What's it going to take for us to put you into this Dodge Charger?
I have nothing. There's literally nothing you can do to put me in a Dodge Charger. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this.
All right, so thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you guys later.